My brother turned my life into hell, then got my wife pregnant. Now he wants my help after our parents disowned him and left me their $5 million inheritance. My younger brother, David, has always harbored a deep resentment toward me. If you think it stemmed from jealousy, you'd be wrong. He was the spoiled child, not me. There was no reason for him to be envious. To give you some context, our mother always pampered David. He was the golden child of our family. She cooked for him, did his laundry, and even asked me to help him with his schoolwork. I was expected to help him simply because we were family, but I never received such attention. I accepted this because I was quite independent. Perhaps part of it was my fault for always catering to his needs without expecting anything in return. He never helped me when I needed it, and only approached me when he wanted something. While I was an introverted, quiet child who loved studying and keeping to myself, he was loud and rude, much like our father. I also had a tendency to be straightforward and honest, never sugarcoating things. I believe my mother may have developed a negative perception of me because of my bluntness. This favoritism made David the family's golden child, and I didn't mind as we grew up. However, the problem began when he started bullying and mocking me for my differences. He would tease me about my height and the fact that I wore glasses. He would sneak into my room, read my diary, and then complain to my mother about what I had written. When I yelled at him and complained to our parents about his invasion of my privacy, they would laugh it off and say it wasn't a big deal. He did far worse things, like nearly breaking my glasses and putting disgusting things in my food. He even once put small pebbles in my cereal, but luckily, I found them before they could damage my teeth. When I told my mother, she dismissed it, saying this was how brothers bonded. Whenever we argued, David would target my insecurities to insult me. We attended the same school, so he knew I was bullied by a few other kids. Instead of supporting me, he sided with the bullies, calling me names like ugly loser or hairy monkey, and even encouraged them to harm me physically, saying I was just a big loser. On one occasion, during an argument over something so trivial I can't even remember, he told me to kill myself. While I could easily brush off most insults, that one really hurt because at the time, I was struggling with my mental health. By then, I was doing better, but it was devastating to hear that my own brother wanted me dead, especially since our father was frequently away at work. Mom didn't seem to care much. She even scolded me once, saying it was my fault for making him upset. Things got worse during high school. There was a shocking incident where David tried to set my hair on fire, and unbelievably, our mother defended him, saying he was just playing around. Seriously, who acts like that? Fortunately, my dad finally took my side and pointed out the seriousness of the situation. He even threatened to call the police on David. This moment was a real shock for my brother because he had never faced any consequences for his actions before. He was truly stunned, and my dad made it clear that enough was enough. Enough. And David needed to start respecting his older brother. After that, Dad came into my room to talk. I never expected his support since he always told David how alike they were. But this time, Dad admitted that he had waited for years, hoping David would mature. However, he had slowly come to realize that David was turning into a full-fledged bully. Hearing this from my dad was incredibly emotional for me. I almost broke down in tears. I confessed everything David had done to me over the years, and even mentioned the bullying at school. My dad was shocked at how much I had endured. The next day, he spoke with the principal to ensure that the bullies were warned about serious consequences if they continued. That evening, my dad signed me up for MMA classes at a local gym, telling me that I needed to be strong and stand up to the bullies in my life. I admit that for a nerdy kid like me, trying to learn how to fight seemed funny, but I was determined. I managed my time well to balance my studies with daily training. The MMA classes completely transformed my life physically. One day, David was back at his antics. He stole my allowance, the money we received for helping out with chores. I had been saving it for a long time. David sneaked into my room and took the money. I caught him just as he was about to ride his bike off to meet his friends. I demanded that he return my money, but David smirked and said all I could do was run to Dad for help. I don't know what came over me, but I punched him in the face. He was stunned, fell backward, and I took my money back from his pocket before shoving him again. David started crying loudly, which was honestly hilarious. However, my mom rushed out to help him and figure out what had happened. When she found out I had hit him, she was shocked and scolded me, saying I should be a better role model for David. David seemed to enjoy seeing me get reprimanded. My mom also complained to my dad about my behavior, saying I needed to be controlled. My dad sternly demanded that we both explain ourselves. I told him that David had stolen the money I had worked hard to save. Meanwhile, David tried to justify himself by saying that he needed the money for a date and that, as his older brother, I should help him. However, my dad told David that he was lucky I only punched him for stealing because anyone else would have called the police. He went on to tell David that he had no right to take other people's belongings without their permission. One was an ongoing affair with her married colleague that lasted for years, and the other was a brief fling with an ex-boyfriend during a visit to her family. Some might think I was naive, and looking back, I can't completely disagree. Each time we broke up for a while, I chose to forgive my wife. I didn't want to raise a child in a broken home and believed that we could overcome these obstacles. The affair with her colleague happened when we were young, and I chalked it up to youthful mistakes and poor judgment. For a while, things seemed to get better, though I could never fully trust her again. I did my best to push my doubts aside, knowing that if I chose to forgive, I had to truly work toward a fresh start. 4 years had passed since her second betrayal, and I felt confident in my decision to give her another chance. Karen seemed to have changed, and we were genuinely happy, planning for our family's future. However, 3 months ago, my world shattered again when she revealed that she had been in a long-term affair and hinted that our son might not be mine. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks, a mix of shock, betrayal, and overwhelming disbelief. I struggled to grasp the enormity of her confession. For a day, I tried to ask why she had kept such an important secret and how she could do something so devastating. Her response was cold and indifferent, as if she was detached from the pain she had caused. Her vague reactions left me with more questions than answers. It was a surreal and painful moment, confronting the shattered trust and uncertainty about my own family. I kept pressing Karen for the truth because I felt I deserved to know the father of the child I had raised since birth. Finally, she admitted, it was David. My eyes widened in shock. When I asked Karen what she meant, she explained that she and David had become friends when I introduced her to my family, and she stayed with us from Thanksgiving through New Year's. David was usually cold toward me, but warm and polite with her. That made me happy because I didn't want Karen to feel unwelcome. Karen wanted to be accepted into my family, so she spent a lot of time with my mother whenever she could. She noticed the rift between David and me and asked me about it. I opened up about our strained relationship, explaining that we might never reconcile because of his unresolved emotions. Karen understood but started including David in our outings, hoping it would help us bond. Whenever we planned to watch a movie, she invited David and we watched whatever he chose. During this time, David and I exchanged a few words. That was an improvement from his usual silent treatment. I remember Karen and David hanging out and playing video games together, but I never thought much of it. Karen told me that one day, David opened up to her about his struggles with a recent breakup. Feeling vulnerable, he confided in her. She mentioned that he would flirt with her harmlessly when I wasn't around, and eventually, things escalated beyond her control. The image of my wife and my brother sleeping together made me feel sick. Karen confessed that she felt guilty afterward and distanced herself from him. That aligned with her sudden decision to go home instead of ringing in the new year with me. Even though I tried to convince her to stay, she insisted on leaving. When we reunited in college after the holidays, she was as cheerful as ever, so I never questioned anything. 2 weeks later, we found out she was pregnant. Karen admitted she didn't know whether the child was mine or David's, and there was no way to prove it. She chose to stay with me, knowing I was the more reliable brother. That was why we got married. My world felt like it was collapsing. The son I loved might not even be mine. I asked Karen if she had slept with David recently, and she slowly nodded. She revealed that they had always kept in touch because their connection was undeniable. They would sneak off to hotels, lying to me about working overtime. She admitted that half of her business trips were actually romantic getaways with him. I asked why she married me if she wanted my brother. Karen said she didn't want to be the one to break up the marriage. She saw me as a great father to our son and decided to stay with me. Her words cut like a knife. She admitted she had made mistakes and didn't know when to stop. I told Karen I was glad she had told me the truth, but I would be packing my things and leaving. She started crying, begging for forgiveness, expecting me to yell at her. Instead, I calmly packed my clothes. Karen insisted that if I loved her, I had to fight for her and that mistakes happen in every marriage. When she realized I wasn't going to do anything, she changed tactics, saying that our son would be affected by a divorce and that children shouldn't be raised in broken homes. I reminded her that I might not even be the father of the child, which made her cry even more and accuse me of being cruel. It seemed like she believed nothing could make me want to leave the marriage. Maybe part of it was my fault for letting things slide in the past. While I loved her, that feeling stemmed from the thought that we had a son together and had been together since college. Karen kept insisting that it wasn't too late to fix things, but I struggled to believe her and had no patience left. Lost trust was the real issue, and her words felt empty. Even if I forgave her, I could never forget that she had slept with my brother. I had always been forgiving, believing that everyone made mistakes, but this was beyond what I could accept. I left her crying at the door and checked into a hotel. The next day, I went straight to my parents' house and revealed everything about my wife's affair with David, explaining that they had been secretly sleeping together for years. The shock on their faces was undeniable. Given her nature, my mother initially tried to defend David, insisting that her son could never do something like that to his own brother. Determined to expose the truth, I asked my parents to stay silent and let me call David in front of them. I asked them to remain quiet so I could catch David off guard, making him think it was a private conversation. When David answered the phone, I confronted him about the affair. At first, he vehemently denied it, refusing to take any responsibility. However, when I told him that Karen had confessed everything, he immediately started blaming her, calling her manipulative. He claimed that it wasn't his fault if women were attracted to him and that he was the better-looking brother. I firmly told him that I would expose him to everyone. David scoffed at me, saying no one would believe me because he was the golden child. I mocked his arrogance and thanked him for confirming the truth, knowing that our parents had heard everything. David went silent, then stammered, trying to explain himself and salvage his image. My mother, still in shock, demanded that David explain. He stuttered in a weak attempt to justify his actions, blaming everyone but himself and desperately trying to shift the blame onto Karen. I could see my mother, who had always defended her spoiled son, now feeling a mix of disappointment and anger. At that moment, I felt a strange sense of vindication. For years, I had endured David's torment. Now, the truth was out, and the roles had reversed. It was David who had exposed himself for everyone to see. As David's words became more hesitant, my father, usually reserved in his expressions, could no longer hide his disappointment. He asked me to hand him the phone and began speaking to David. "David," my father began, his voice filled with disappointment. "What you have done is not just a betrayal of your brother, but a betrayal of this family. You slept with your brother's wife and continued the affair even after they were married. Your actions have severe consequences and have irreparably broken the trust we had in you. I raised both of you, teaching you the importance of loyalty and family honor. What you have shown today defies everything I tried to teach you." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink into David's conscience. "Your disregard for your brother's feelings and your lack of respect for his marriage are unacceptable. You haven't just hurt him, you've shattered the bond that held this family together. Your mother and I bear some responsibility for what you've become, but from today onward, we will no longer tolerate this behavior. You will be cut off from the college fund I set up for you. You will have to find your own way to pay for your university tuition. I will also stop funding your lifestyle. Do you think that makes you more of a man, sleeping with married women? Let's see how you manage without my money." I remained calm, even though I initially wanted to scream at David. Watching my father punish him was the ultimate vindication I needed. I had exposed his true nature, and it was clear he had underestimated the consequences. My mother, despite David's constant protests, still tried to justify him. But my father quickly ended the call, shutting down David's attempts to explain away his actions. Afterward, my mother came over and hugged me. It had been a long time since we'd shared a moment like that, but in that embrace, there was an unspoken understanding and support. Amidst the family chaos, she apologized for never believing me all these years. My 14-year-old self could never have imagined this moment, being vindicated and embraced by my mother. After that, my father helped me find a good lawyer to proceed with my divorce from Karen. She and her lawyer tried to fight dirty, demanding alimony since I earned more than her. But her affair worked heavily in my favor. We also conducted a paternity test, and the results confirmed that David was indeed the father of the child. That news was devastating, perhaps even worse than discovering Karen's infidelity. I was furious that the son I had loved and raised wasn't mine. However, I made a firm decision. Karen begged me to continue visiting my son, arguing that he shouldn't be punished for the situation. But I couldn't bear to see him. He reminded me too much of David, and I hated that. After my divorce was finalized, I felt a wave of freedom wash over me as I moved into my own bachelor apartment. It was strange living alone since I had married so young and had never truly had the chance to experience independence. However, my naturally independent nature allowed me to adjust quickly to my new lifestyle. I genuinely enjoyed it. 2 weeks ago, my father called to tell me that he was considering changing his will because he didn't want to leave anything to David. My father was extremely stubborn, and once he decided to cut David out of his life, he was firm about it. David had tried reaching out to our parents and had even shown up at their doorstep begging for forgiveness, but they refused to let him in. Even my mother, who used to cave to David's tantrums, seemed to be done with him, though that was probably the hardest part for her. David never texted me to apologize for what he had done, proving that he wasn't remorseful for his actions. He was only upset about being cut off from our parents. My father told me that he planned to leave everything to me, ensuring that David wouldn't contest it later. He would leave David exactly $1. My eyes widened in shock because my father had worked hard his entire life. His assets, retirement funds, and life insurance totaled nearly $5 million. The only condition in his will was that if he passed away before my mother, she would continue living in their home, even though ownership would transfer to me. I didn't mind this since I wanted to take care of my mother in her final years. Somehow, David found out about this, and when he couldn't reach our parents, he called me yesterday, trying to make amends. He explained that he was struggling with college, and after Karen found out about his paternity, she had been pressuring him for child support. He said he had no money and was looking for a part-time job but couldn't find anything. He begged me to talk to our family to help him get back on his feet because he desperately needed my help. I laughed in his face and told him I was done with him. I reminded him that he should have thought about the consequences before sleeping with my wife and getting her pregnant. David protested that I was being unfair and that Karen was also to blame, which I agreed with. I reminded him that I had divorced her, making her his responsibility now. He shouldn't be calling me to complain about her or the child, as they were the consequences of his own actions. David started raising his voice, but I cut him off, reminding him that he was no longer the spoiled child of the family. He was the disgrace who had slept with his own brother's wife. At that moment, David started crying, telling me that everyone, including our grandparents and extended relatives, had turned their backs on him. While that was true, it was no longer my concern. I told him we were done and that he should never call me again because I no longer considered him my brother. Since then, I've replayed the conversation in my mind. Even though I hate my brother, I've never heard him cry, at least not since we were kids. I won't lie, it stung a little to see him so helpless. So I guess I'm here to ask if I should talk to my parents about him, or if I'd be a fool to do so. Update 1. Hello, everyone. Many of you have asked why I no longer keep in touch with my son Henry, and some have even called me heartless. I need to explain that I am not comfortable raising another man's child. This was not the stepchild situation I once believed it to be. Henry was my son, but then I found out that he was actually my brother David's son. Of course, this revelation deeply broke me, and I cried over it for days. The main reason I don't want contact with Henry is that I no longer want Karen in my life. If I stay in touch with her child, she will find a way to get back into my life, and I need my own space. You may think I'm cruel or selfish, but I cannot see him, at least not for a very long time. Most of you correctly guessed that my mother was the one who informed David about my father's change in his will, which led to David calling me as a last-ditch effort to fix things. I confronted her in front of my father, and she broke down, saying that I had punished David enough and that he had learned his lesson. My father firmly told my mother that if she truly believed what David had done was forgivable, then he could no longer stay married to her because he could never forgive such a betrayal. That threat was enough to silence my mother. My father made it clear that if she spoke to David again and we found out, she could pack her bags and leave. As I've mentioned before, my father is extremely stubborn. Hopefully, my mother will learn from her mistakes. Reddit, it has been 5 months since my last update. My relationship with my parents has improved over the past few months. My father and I go golfing every weekend, and he treats me more like a friend than a son. Although my mother misses David, she has kept her distance from him. The last I heard about David was from my cousin, who said that David had been begging people for money and eventually had to drop out of college because he couldn't afford tuition. He and Karen are now living together, and he has a part-time job as a mechanic. Apparently, they are raising Henry together. I guess that's a good thing. I never discuss David with my parents, and they don't bring him up either. Since people have been asking, I'm doing quite well. I was promoted at my company 2 months ago, so my salary has significantly improved. I haven't dated anyone yet because I feel I still need time and space to heal. I've been going to therapy, so we'll see how that goes. Thank you for reading. If you haven't subscribed, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more shocking real-life stories happening around you.